Okay, good morning. Good morning. We'll ask everybody to take their seats so that we can get going here. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on behalf of the Arlington Coalition of Black Clergy and, of course, Mount Olive Baptist Church. We want to welcome you to our annual Beloved Community Celebration honoring the legacy and the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on today, what would have been his 95th birthday. I'm going to start with us just having a word of prayer. I think it's appropriate for us to open. God, who is light and spirit, God who dwells in us, around us, above us, and in the world, we thank you for the journey to this place physically as well as virtually. We thank you for the mission and for the reason of our gathering and for the life of the one that we honor. We pray today, God, that all that we would do and say and how we interact would be befitting of the legacy of Dr. King, and more importantly, would be befitting of the one that Dr. King heralded as Savior and Lord of the world. Guide our discussion, God. Open our ears, our hearts, our minds, our spirits to you and to one another, we pray. Amen. My name is Danielle Bridgeforth, and I'm a member of the Arlington Coalition of Black Clergy, and it is my honor and pleasure to also serve as a senior pastor of the church at Clarendon, the First Baptist Church of Clarendon here in Arlington. And so thank you again for joining us. We're going to jump right in to our panel discussion because we want to keep our time. And so today we will be again having this discussion about building the beloved community. And I want to start simply by asking each of our panelists to give a brief introduction of themselves. And then I think the question I want to start with is just kind of the ways that you have seen the beloved community lived out or manifested in your particular area of interest or in your corner of the world. Give us your brief introduction of who you are, what you do, how you serve our community, and then how have you seen the beloved community manifested? Amen. Okay. Okay, and we can just start right here on the end, and or we can maybe two people. How about this? How about we? The two people on the end just got here. Why don't we start in the middle? Why don't we let Brother JD start us, please? God bless you, sir.
Thank you. Oh, they came to me? Yeah, it came to you. Okay. Well, good morning. I'm Julius Dimon Spain, Senior. Many folks know me as JD. Been here in Arlington in about 15 years. Product of South Carolina, community advocate, former president of the NAACP here. When I think about the beloved community and where we are today and what I've seen, actually, we've made some steps in the right direction, but we still have a long way to go. MLK, we're here today, he talked about nonviolence, right? I think when we think about the beloved community and the measures we have taken, we have, in fact, again, taken some steps. However, many of those steps have not been to a point where I believe have been served justice to the entire community, the whole community. So I'm not going to pinpoint at this moment any particular policy or issue. I think at the NAACP, we've worked in tandem over the years with a number of stakeholders to try to make a positive change for everyone. But again, there's still a lot of work that remains to be done here in Arlington.
I can't hear you.
This is our opening.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, good morning. Still morning. Good morning. Good, happy MLK Day. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for allowing us to have this discussion with you. My name is Devanshi Patel. I am so excited to be here again with you on this lovely panel, and I thank all of you for serving on this panel because I'm excited for the conversation we're going to have today. For me, when I was thinking about putting thoughts together, we were asked to kind of present a specific lens on the beloved community. And so the lens that I will be talking to you about today is restorative justice. And so I want to begin with, of course we know that the beloved community is one in which a group of people intentionally and willingly come together to stand for ideals, right? It's a community that is devoid of hunger. It's a community that's devoid of hate and poverty. And I wanted to talk about what a restorative community is. A restorative community believes that our individual and our collective responsibility is to create and sustain the conditions that are necessary for everyone to freely live, work, and play in healthy and safe communities. And so I posit to you today that a restorative community is the beloved community. I'm obviously grateful to be able to speak about this because the Center for Youth and Family Advocacy, which is the organization that I'm associated with, is working to make Arlington a restorative community. And so what does that mean? To break it down a little bit for those who are unfamiliar with restorative practice, it is a cultural doctrine that recognizes that each member of the community is responsible to and for the whole. And so restorative communities practice restorative justice. And restorative justice, it views crimes, misconducts, harms against one another as a violation of people, right? Not a violation of law. It looks to build community, and it provides a process for accountability and restoration after harm that has happened, to understand why it happened, to help us understand the needs that arise from that harm. And then, of course, what actions need to be taken to repair that harm. Restorative justice, restorative practice, it finds itself with origins in ancient and indigenous practices, and it's employed in cultures around the world. And so the question then becomes, as we're being asked, is how do we become a restorative community? I will say Dr. King warned us that systems of oppression will never voluntarily relinquish freedom, and the beloved community will not come easily. And 70 years later, after he gave the Birth of a New Nation speech, our work continues. Remaining steadfast in our labor to achieve the restorative community requires us to focus on several things: true legal system reform, investment in a strong social safety net, and access to quality health care. And so in Arlington today, what we see is CYFA's community-based pre-charge restorative justice program. It's disrupting the plantation, mass incarceration, and the preschool to prison pipeline. Income guarantee and economic mobility programs are disrupting poverty and creating inclusive communities. And then, of course, our state and federal legislative reforms are advancing equitable access to health care as a fundamental right. So how do we build this restorative community? Persistent revolt, persistent agitation, persistent rising against the system. And a restorative community's biggest weapon is nonviolence, nonviolent resistance. Nonviolence in the restorative community requires more than loving thy neighbor. It demands action, and it requires all people to respect the dignity and worth of each of us by standing against systems of economic injustice and social injustice. I do want to provide one cautionary note. Listen, I'm culturized to hip hop. And during the same time that restorative justice has gained popularity in the United States, we have now come to the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Hip hop has actually taken over the world. And it has powerfully and masterfully integrated culture, bringing the calls of justice mainstream. And like restorative practice, hip-hop does it for the culture, right? Hip-hop is a way of living. It takes the wisdom of the elders and the energy of young people to elevate the voices of the people most impacted by injustice as visionaries and architects for the beloved community. I think this 50th anniversary of hip-hop provides a reflection point for where we are in the beloved community, where we are in creating the restorative movement. Hip-hop and restorative justice belong to the people, to the community, to those impacted by systemic harm. And in order to authentically demand accountability for centuries-long failures in dismantling the structures and maintaining the social order, restorative proponents actually must now challenge the status quo. Unfortunately, restorative justice in the United States has failed to avoid the pitfalls of appropriation and institutionalization. System occupation of restorative justice, of course, has its consequences. It dishonors community roots and further disenfranchises and disempowers the people it works to serve. So I say, and I'll leave you with this, community must demand correction because the success of restorative communities requires power to be vested with its people. And so I end this opening statement that we all get with the simple truism. People build community. Systems maintain order. Thank you.
My name is Ashley Goff, and I'm the pastor at Arlington Presbyterian Church. And Arlington Presbyterian Church is located basically at Glebe and Columbia Pike. We are on the entry level of Gilliam Place, and Gilliam Place is the 173-unit affordable housing apartment building that was co-created by APC and Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing. And our worship and office space is on the entry level of Gilliam Place to maintain our commitment to the lack of affordable housing in Arlington County and to be in community with our neighbors of Gilliam Place, and especially those of 22204. So this is my opening statement. Dr. King envisioned the beloved community because of white supremacy and the legacy of European colonialism. The idea that white people constitute a superior race and therefore should have a right to dominate all other races. White supremacy is baked in history, systems, relationships, logic, and worldviews. And as a person of faith, all of this is included in our churches, especially the white church. For Dr. King, the beloved community was not a lofty, otherworldly, idealistic goal. The beloved community was, for Dr. King, a realistic, achievable community that could be attained by a critical mass of people committed to and organized around and trained in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence. So Dr. King's beloved community was and still is a global vision in which all people can share in the wellness of the planet. Dr. King early on described himself as a profound advocate of the social gospel, who decried a capitalist system that put profits and property rights ahead of basic human rights. And Dr. King's dream included more than civil and voting rights, while those were central. King had a vision, a demand that every person had adequate food and education and housing and a decent job and income. So poverty and homelessness and hunger would not be tolerated because standards of human decency would not allow it in the beloved community. And one of the core values of the beloved community was agape love. And MLK said that agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people. It begins by loving others for their sakes and makes no distinction between a friend and enemy, and it is directed towards both. Agape is love, seeking to preserve and create community. So for the faith community, for me, Dr. King's beloved community means two things. One, the faith community has a central role in the moral imagination. The moral imagination is grounded in the absolute belief that the world can be better. And there is the world as it is, and then there's the world as it should be. And as a Christian, I would say it this way: a moral imagination envisions Isaiah's new heaven and new earth, or in this way: Jesus asked his disciples, "Have you heard about the new wine and the new wineskin? If so, why do you keep saying the old is good?" And the church, as you have grown accustomed to it, it's an old wineskin. And the wine inside the wineskin, well, it's old too. So in 1956, in facing the challenge of a new age, Dr. King said it this way: the tensions which we witness in the world today are indicative of the fact that a new world order is being born and an old order is passing away. Old man segregation is on his deathbed. History has proven that social systems have a great last-minute breathing power, and the guardians of the status quo are always on hand with their oxygen tents to keep the old order alive. So the moral imagination disrupts the notion that the world as it is reflects God's intentions. And the faith community is to keep a moral imagination alive, vibrant in its local community. And while King's moral imagination was global, the local church is called to live out the moral imagination in its local community. So that means here. And then the second thing, community organizing. So this is the ethic, the doing of the moral imagination. of imagining what beyond what is ordinary, what we can see for a world made new. So this is the power of the moral imagination, the flesh and the lifeblood, our ability to act. In community organizing, we organize people and we organize money. And I include money because King was clear how money was used to subjugate and create harm in the Black community. So we organize people and we organize money to disrupt the systems and create new ones that allow Black lives to flourish. And we organize to create the world, right, as it should be, this beloved community. And Dr. King's campaigns usually included 6 steps of nonviolent action. You gather the information, you learn and you teach people, you maintain your personal commitment, you negotiate, which means you always come to power with a proposal, you have direct action, so you create some creative tension that actually creates something new, and then you stay very, very focused. So King re-envisioned our life together that includes public and political life. And each person needs to be bonded to each other and nurtured by each other. And in the Catholic Jesuit tradition, there is a beautiful phrase where they say, you become a person of others, that we are of each other, a person of others. So King wrote, we must learn to live together, or we will be forced to die together. And despite tremendous obstacles and violent obstacles, King had an unrelenting insistence on change. And the moral imagination and community that a faith community can provide are essential to that creation of change.
So I got to follow that. I'm the Reverend Carol Thomas Sissel, and I'm going to stand up because this table is really small. Not that you guys couldn't stand up if you want to. And I will tell you, this morning I am weary. And I am weary because at the end of a 3-day weekend celebrating MLK, I have been to 2 prayer breakfasts, 1 food drive, a concert that had voices of Arlington clergy and activists reading the words of Dr. King, another food drive at my church this morning, and now I'm here. I am weary because for some reason we continue to take 3 days a year to recognize Dr. King and 3 days a year to talk about beloved community. I will leave here and go home and sleep, which many, I know, of you all are going to do the same thing, because what has happened is we've turned this into an occasion to haul out the ministers, to talk about beloved community, and then we go away for another year. This is not acceptable. So I want you to know I'm tired, and if I sound crispy, that is why. Again, I'll tell you, I'm Rev Carol Thomas Sissel. I serve as the Minister of Community Development and Social Justice at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington. That's a long title. What it means is I serve approximately 800 white souls who are loving and compassionate and want to do better. I've been here since August of 2021. They brought me here. They hired me. I answered their call specifically to hold a portfolio of social justice and to help them make the world a better place. That's the part I want you to remember, if nothing else, that there are 800 people in that congregation who do have money, who do have wherewithal, who want to make Arlington and the world a better place. And one of the things they decided to do was bring me here. This is supposed to be 5 minutes, and I'm going to read the stuff I wrote. For Unitarian Universalists, what is the beloved community? The beloved community happens when everyone is offered and welcome a seat at the table. It means that we look at our neighbors, our new friends, our old companions, we look them directly in the eye, and we see them with a lens that is covered with dignity and respect. Beloved community asks each one of us to be accountable. Hold on to that word. To be accountable and to hold each other accountable. Beloved community leaves no one on the margins or on the sidelines. It is intentional. It is not accidental. It brings people who are diverse in a number of ways to the table. Diverse in class, in race, in ethnicity, in education, in gender, in sexual orientation, backgrounds, and identities, with physical, emotional, and mental abilities that are different. The key word here after accountability is bringing people together. What we have to do is keep our eye on the realization of justice and equality for everyone in the immediate community of Arlington and in the broader world. I'm going to go back to that word accountability before I close. What does it mean to be accountable in a beloved community? We must hold ourselves accountable when we make sure to do what we say we will do, to walk our talk. In practice, this is what it means for my days: keeping the pantry full, making enough compassion bags so none of the homeless in our community lack coats or hats or gloves in the winter. Accountability happens when a leader stops, when people like the ones I'm sitting next to stop, when they breathe, when they make or take the time to discern what the needs of the people in the community truly are. In the end, to build the beloved community, we must hold each other accountable. We must help each other see and dismantle hate, bigotry, bias, and both intentional and accidental acts and behaviors that cause harm and hurt and make anyone feel unwelcome. King defined the beloved community as a global vision in which all people can share in the wealth of the earth, a world where racism and all forms of discrimination and bigotry and prejudice will be replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood. Those are his words. These are mine in closing. When we are practicing the beloved community, we must center love at the foundation. Love is accountability. Love is justice. Love is belonging. Love must never be a byproduct of our efforts. No, love must be the basic foundation of everything we do.
Good morning. My name's Fatima Argan, and I am a community activist. I work with interfaith organizations to bring about public policies that work for everyone, or almost everyone. I just want to thank Reverend Davis and Reverend Victor for their invitation to speak today. I'm truly honored to be among my distinguished panelists on what would have been Dr. King's 95th birthday, to provide my interfaith perspective on what a beloved community means to me and the importance of his legacy today. I'll also note for the record that although I'm on a number of boards of directors of interfaith nonprofit organizations, and also the chair of Inclusion and Equity for Arlington Democrats. I'm the chair of Interfaith Outreach and Advocacy, also for that same organization, and have organized an interfaith Eid celebration for the last 6 years as an effort to bring together the interfaith communities in Arlington and beyond. Today, I will be speaking in my personal capacity. I'll give you a little bit of a history about how I came to this work and why I do it and what really drives me. My interfaith perspective comes from my upbringing as a proud Turkish American, a woman, and an American Muslim. I was always in a minority no matter where my family lived in America. I had the great good fortune, however, to have parents that understood the value of diversity, and their friends reflected that. They came from a very wide circle of socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnicities, and religious traditions. They were unequivocally treated as family, and in fact, I called them Aunt so-and-so and Uncle this and that, until they all passed away, which was many years later, fortunately. We had them around for a long time. But it was in this loving, inclusive environment that I was fortunate to grow up in, which encouraged my curiosity, that I developed the understanding that difference is not a bad thing. It's actually a learning opportunity. The Quran states that Allah, God, created all people from Adam and Eve and made them in different cultures, races, and faiths to compete and cooperate together for the prosperity of mankind, not to fight each other. I didn't know it then, but now I realize that I grew up in something resembling what Dr. King would have probably considered a beloved community. One where there is inclusion and acceptance for who you are, regardless of your circumstances. One of the greatest challenges in the last few years I've encountered as an interfaith leader is dealing with hate speech and actions in the form of Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and the like. It hasn't always been easy, and the current political climate in the Middle East has presented new challenges. Nonetheless, I continue to work with colleagues to tackle these issues in ways that create greater awareness, consistent with our common goals to signal the need for positive change in our communities and take action. A key element of strategies that we employ in the interfaith community is, first of all, it is to provide education about faith traditions, their core beliefs, and how these beliefs drive worldviews and policy preferences. We strive to work to create learning opportunities and outcomes that provide the greatest benefits for as many in our community as possible. Next, we provide opportunities for dialogue, creating safe spaces for people to take their learning and then ask questions based on genuine curiosity and a spirit of inquiry to deepen understanding and relationships in the community. And I will emphasize here that it is about building those relationships and building relationships based on who you are as a human being first. No labels, not you're a this or that, but you know, what is it that drives you? What do you enjoy? Do you enjoy going to the park with your kids? Do you enjoy football? Do you enjoy pizza? Whatever it is, on a human level, that's where we need to start. Finally, we engage in activism to express our concerns to government leaders as faith communities about policies that we think will have adverse effects on our communities, such as climate change, hate speech, I already gave that example, or minimum wage legislation, just to give a few examples. I'll also give you two recent examples of our activism. I co-wrote an op-ed with a Jewish colleague expressing concern that SCOTUS didn't base their decision in the Dobbs case on a proper understanding of the beliefs of all faith traditions. That you can find that on the internet if you're interested in reading it. I won't go into too much more detail because I've got a lot more to say, but a second example is more recently, I worked with an interfaith team to report a hate incident in a neighboring jurisdiction. By following this up, by speaking in a public forum and asking the governing leaders to denounce in a resolution the bigoted actions, vile language, and threat of physical violence of one group toward another, we made it clear that such behavior was not in keeping with the code of conduct for our vision of a peaceful, inclusive community, a beloved community. We made a difference. I'll end by giving my perspective on how I think Dr. King would have responded to the violence in Gaza at the present moment. As a spiritually evolved individual who understood the value of nonviolent communication and action, he advocated for peace. His words about the Vietnam War ring as true today as then. I oppose the war in Vietnam because I love America. I speak out against it not in anger, but with anxiety and sorrow in my heart, and above all, with a passionate desire to see our beloved country stand as a moral example of the world. I feel in my heart, and his daughter Bernice King confirmed this recently, that he would have advocated for a ceasefire in Gaza and freeing the hostages. Further, he understood and very eloquently articulated a basic but very powerful principle. I quote, Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. A just and sustainable peace based on the principles of the beloved community cannot come from violence, double standards, or inequitable treatment. Peace can only be assured when each side sees the humanity of the other and through dialogue engages in honest negotiations based on trust, leading to equal treatment for all. Thank you.
Good morning. I feel like my colleague at the other end of the table. Sometimes when you begin to speak, you feel like everyone has said everything there is to say. And sometimes the role then is to go, amen, and go home and rest, because that too is a radical thing. I'm Lisa Lynn Jacobs. I am a 34-year member of the Arlington community, and I am with you this morning to speak on behalf of Restorative Arlington. I am also a preacher's kid, so I'm going to try to be, I'm glad there's a clock back there. I'm going to try to be mindful so that we can attempt to bring all of this in on time. I think that when I think of restorative community, I think of the Gospel of Matthew and the injunction to love thy neighbor. That is a place to start, as Devanshi shared, right? But I think the thing that we often miss with that is that love thy neighbor is an active thing, right? It is not passive, right? So it is not enough in community to be not something, right? It is not enough to be not racist, not anti-LGBTQ, not xenophobic, etc. You have to be anti whatever that is, and that means that you have to raise your voice and use your hands and your heart and bring whatever skills and abilities that you have to the fore to move us forward to get to that place that Dr. King talked about, where justice rolls down. And Restorative Arlington's piece of that, I think, started just about 4 years ago. I'm a civil rights lawyer by training. I do a lot of federal advocacy, particularly in the space of domestic and sexual violence. And so I was working in the federal space around restorative justice issues and wanted to understand more about it. And at that same point, the Annie Casey Foundation was beginning to work with the Arlington County government on the question of getting restorative justice programming here. And precisely as that happened, the pandemic descended. And I was saying to somebody the other day, do we now remember, is it this like vague memory that we were on websites where people were telling us where we could find toilet paper, and that was revolutionary, right? I literally could not figure out how we were going to do the work that needed to be done to pull together a master plan to do restorative justice when we were relegated to do it by Zoom, right? That was novel. You know, now these days, all my work is done that way, but it was novel. But when beloved community shows up with their hands and their heart, ready to do the work, you figure out a way to do that. I remember, Devanshi is nodding because she was there, right? I think we were all in more, and Parissa, who I saw back there, was there as well. We were all in more Zoom meetings, in more subcommittees, whether or not they were literally about community or about education or about the justice system, how we could begin to move those places in a direction that were more inclusive, and that, you know, I often think of what Brian Stevenson says in this space, and that is to remember that no one is merely the worst thing that they ever did, right? And I think that that is part of what we try to do in restorative justice, to remember people's humanity, to remember that they too, whatever it is that someone has done, which requires reconciliation, which requires accountability, that at the end of the day, these are still our brothers, our sisters, our community members, and that however it is that we choose to hold them accountable, they're coming home to us. And that we have to figure out how to do that work. And that is what Restorative Arlington has sought to do. First, as I like to describe it, incubated by Arlington County, and then spun off as a nonprofit, and then launching the Heart of Safety Advocacy entity, which takes referrals from the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, from the public schools, and which does the work, which also works in partnership in community, which among other things, George Mason University, right, which is where the Roslyn and Jimmy Carter Center for, am I doing this correctly, Freedom and Peace is located. So we have certainly begun to do the work, right, whether or not it is to train people with the skills of restorative justice, whether or not it is to take cases involving restorative justice. But the work remains unfinished, right? There is certainly more to do. There are certainly more conversations to be had. There is certainly more advocacy to be done. But when I think about where we have been, and many of the people who are sitting at this table have partnered with us to do this work, when I think about where we have been and even where the county was 4 years ago, it leaves me hopeful, and justice may be beginning to trickle down, but that's different than justice rolling down, much less righteousness like a holy stream. So I look forward to continuing to work on many of these issues in coordination, in advocacy, and in love with you all.
All right, thank you so much to each of you for your perspective of how you have seen and how you understand the beloved community. And we're going to be honoring of our time. And so I'm going to move to what was the last question on the list that you all received. And we've heard a lot already in terms of specific steps. But I want us to speak. I would like each of you, whoever feels comfortable or feels like they have something to add that hasn't already been stated, to speak to just the average citizen and the ways in which you see them, you see us specifically working to create this beloved community, this place where we can be anti-racist, multicultural, nonviolent. So many wonderful things have been said, inclusive, accountable, where we are resisting white supremacy, where we're becoming a person of others, where we are remembering the humanity of those who are beside us. And I think possibly what is most important, discerning the needs of the community. Because it's different, I think the building is different than what I think needs to happen. It needs to be what we collectively understand is good for the better will of everybody. I think that's what Dr. King was trying to promote. And so I think what I would like for us to end here with is, what steps would you give to Arlington residents and community officials about how to create this beloved community in a tangible, reachable way, so that, to the point that Reverend Carol has mentioned today, we aren't here next year espousing the same stuff that we espoused this year, but maybe make it something that is tangible so that we'll have a way of judging if we've done it in 2025 when we gather. Can you help us with that? And I'll just share very briefly that 2 summers ago, I had an opportunity to go on a civil rights pilgrimage with some local pastors, and one of the most, now in that pilgrimage, I visited most of the significant civil rights places in the South. And one of the most impactful places where I went was to the Tallahatchie Courthouse in Mississippi, where the two men who murdered Emmett Till were ultimately found not guilty. And we learned about the work that Tallahatchie County has done to heal, even though that place is always going to be marked and marred by Money, Mississippi, and Tallahatchie River is always going to be marked and marred by what happened there, but you have to move on. And so they have come to this resolution, and they did this long process of repenting, of listening, and of coming together as a community to say, we apologize, not only for the murder of Emmett Till, but for everything that let the murder of Emmett Till happen and not be held accountable in justice. That's the kind of tangible thing that I'm asking us to talk about today. What do we need to do so that we can see movement towards the beloved community of Dr. King being brought to pass? It's 11:46, so everybody will have about 2 minutes. 1 minute. Wow. 1 minute.
Okay, I'll go.
1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Thank you. Hello? So I would like 2 things from everybody in this room. Every time you go to the grocery store, I want you to buy something to feed somebody else. Every time you go to the grocery store. A bag of beans, a can of fruit, a can of tomatoes, a box of pasta. Every time you go to the store, buy something to feed somebody else and either bring it to my church where we have a free pantry or take it to the food bank right here in Arlington. People are hungry. Children do not have enough to eat when they are not in school on a program that feeds them there. So that's the first thing. And there is no excuse for you to come out of the store without something for somebody else to eat. The second thing I would like you to do is when you pay your electricity bill, put $5 aside to pay somebody else's. The idea of hungry people is real. The idea of people who cannot pay their utilities and it is damn cold outside is real. When you put that $5 aside, either bring it to your own house of worship or you can bring it to us because we help pay people's utility bills. I'm not asking you to support my congregation. I'm asking you to support Arlington, to help feed the people and the children in Arlington and to help keep their houses warm or cool once air conditioning season comes on.
I'm thinking of 2 specific things for your actual community, right? If you're a faith community nonprofit. And for me, 2 really important things to look at as an organization. One, your organization, if you believe in the beloved community, your internal organization should actually reflect the ethic of that, right? You can't treat people like jerks in your community, in your internal community, and then expect that to translate externally, right? So you look at your personnel policies and you look at your relationship with your money, right? So your personnel policies should be anti-racist, right? What does your parental leave look like? What does your leave look like? What does your health care look like? You should have a sabbatical policy. You should look at how are you paying your people, right? If you pay your people, if you're looking at your budget and you decide on your staff last, right? Your people are going to get last, right? They're going to get the crumbs. And so you look at your personnel policies and then you look at your relationship with your money. Right? We're a pretty scarcity-driven society, and we have a tendency, more than a tendency, to do that with our money, right? To hoard and to keep it and to save it for a rainy day or something, and it's really pouring out, and people are like, oh, it's still, I don't know. And that's what Arlington Presbyterian had to do with we're now a wealthy congregation, and we had to have a serious come-to-Jesus moment with ourselves and our relationship with our wealth, right? So we want to use our wealth to dismantle these systems of harm rather than hoard it and keep it and to main ourselves into a certain type, we're just sustaining systems at that point. So personnel policies, relationship with your money.
So this is actually a little bit of a difficult question to answer. I want to push back on this. I agree with you 100% about the fact that we elevate this day above all others, and we don't necessarily elevate the things that are happening to make sure that everybody understands that each one of us is working towards creating a beloved or restorative community every day. last year I had the privilege of sitting on this panel, and I sat next to me was Deputy Chief Wayne Vincent. I'm sure all of us here know him. And I want to lift up two things that we talked about last year. Since 2019, CIFA has been working with the Arlington County Police Department to try to close the entry ramps for kids in our community and beyond, but for kids who get in trouble in Arlington to no longer be referred to the legal system for anything, right? And from last year's MLK presentation till today, that's happened. We've closed that entry ramp, right? Kids who commit crime in Arlington, if they qualify with an eligible offense, they are being rerouted from the Arlington County Police Department to CIFA for restorative diversion programming. They're also being routed from the court services unit. So we are breaking down those entry points for kids. We are minimizing their contact with the legal system. We did that, right? We did that post our MLK panel. The other thing we did, and you know, I see one of our electeds here, is we worked on creating equitable funding for all of the nonprofits that are doing the work, right? No longer are we thinking about relational funding here in Arlington. No longer are we saying, I can go to Susan because Susan and I are friends. She's going to be able to throw some money my way. Now we have standardized processes for all organizations to be on equitable footing, right?
Okay,
And so-
that's great.
I'm sorry. Oh, that's my 2 minutes.
That's-
Sorry.
Those are
Just
two very good things.
Expand your reach is
Thank
what I
you.
was going to say. Expand your reach beyond the organizations that you already know, because there's so much good work happening. Find a new organization, work with them.
Awesome.
Thank you. I feel like I got the short end of the stick because everyone here had some remarkable comments, and I'm going to align myself closely with my sister because so much is going through my mind right now. And I was here last year as well, but I'm an individual that thinks about tangible outcomes to the question. And as I'm talking to the citizen that's listening today, and I'm going to speak with you, I want you to look to the person to the left and right. And this is a question that MLK has asked. I want you to ask the person to your left or right, what are you doing for others? What are you doing for others? And if what you are doing, are you coming in your most full, authentic, and genuine self? Because what I have observed in my 15 years of being in Arlington is that people will tell you anything in public to make it sound good. But at the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, and we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility within our community, we fail. So in my circle, which is about community advocacy, you don't have to be an elected leader to make change. The faith-based organization that is here, the strong faith-based organization, is powerful. So if you're watching today, have a minute. Think about what you have been doing. What are you doing? Are you authentic? Are you disingenuous? What is your motive? What is the outcome? It's not the why, it's the what. What are you doing to make a difference? Because again, in the NAACP, I've seen them all. I've seen them come to the branch and say this, that, and the third. I've seen them run for elected office, promise that we're going to do this, and when they don't win, they're silent. You don't see them anymore. Some of us have been on the battlefield for 30, 40 years. And that's what it takes, a soldier, to stay on the battlefield, not convenience. So put yourself in some tough situations this year. Think about what you want to do. Mentor a young lad or a seasoned individual. Join a social justice organization. Okay. Get involved. Go to your county meetings. Go to your planning meetings. Go to your churches. Be involved. And don't rest and wait on someone else to do the work.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
We
God
can
bless
preach
you.
up here.
I know we can. I hear it. I feel it. I feel it. Okay, we got two more people.
Thank you
We want to
very much.
honor them. Thank you.
Wow, that is really a hard act to follow. Thank you, JD. I won't say too much more other than what has already been said by my distinguished colleagues. I'll just sort of build on what they've said. One of the things I do want to talk about is how we can work in partnership with, in an interfaith way. A lot of people see religion as a divisive force, and I have to admit that growing up I sort of had that same perspective myself, but as I really started to get into it and explored it a little bit more, I realized that it can also be a force for partnership. It can be a way that organizations can come together towards common goals, because at the end of the day, this is just my perspective, we have our religious traditions, but there's so much more that we have in common than what makes us different. And it's really about finding those common elements and working to make those happen for everyone in our community.
Okay,
I think
that's perfect.
Is
That's
that
a
it?
perfect place to end.
Wow,
Yes,
that did go fast.
Well, hey, we said a minute to begin with. Remember?
Okay.
All righty. God bless you.
In fear of Sandman Sims coming after me with that hook, I'm going to put my track shoes on. I think that one thing that we can all do is figure out where we can lend our hands,
Okay,
right?
that's great.
Our sister has talked about running a food bank and other things, right? There are churches in this community, there are schools in this community who would love to have our help. Figure out, what we talk about, get in where you fit in. Figure out where that is and go and offer yourself as a servant. I think that's one of those things. I think the other thing that we all need to do, at least I know, speaking for myself, right? Be better about your own internal life, whether or not that is your self-care because you need rest and you're not any good to anybody if you're not rested, whether or not it's listening to that small voice, right? Telling you what is right, what is wrong, what you need to be doing. I sat in church on Christmas Eve, and when we started singing about babies and children in Bethlehem, I burst into tears, right? My 15-year-old looked at me like, do I need to get somebody for her? Because how can we be singing about babies in Bethlehem when Gaza is dark, right? When no one can even have a church service or lift their voices in praise, right? There is so much to do, as we know, here and abroad, and we just need to figure out where to do it and come back to this basic notion of loving our neighbors as ourselves. Because
Awesome.
while it is the easiest injunction to talk about in the Bible, it is the
Gotcha.
most difficult to do. And here comes the hook. So I'm
All right.
handing
We
the
got you.
microphone
We got
back.
you. And look, the conversation continues. Thank you so much. Can we thank our panel?